Howdy, y'all. Against my better judgment, I'm doing a video on how to beat Seraphon. So please don't downvote this into oblivion. All right, so I think it's pretty clear now that Seraphon is one of the top tier armies, but they're not unbeatable. And so there are some ways that if one of your buddies is having a really hard time against your army, send them this video, give them some pointers on how to beat you so that it becomes a fair fight. If you're a Seraphon player, maybe this gives you some tips on how to keep this army alive against some of those other top tier armies. But let's get into it. How to beat Seraphon. We're going to look at a couple of the major players in Seraphon and kind of what they're doing and how to beat them. That includes Fangs of Sotek, Lord Kroak, Salamanders, and then I'm throwing Thunderlizards and Koatl's Claw in there because I think it has a pretty big Achilles heel that you can attack it with to beat those lists. So let's jump right on in. Fangs of Sotek. This is the one that you'll see a lot in those top tier lists. It does a ton of damage. It has a ton of shots. It does mortal wounds. It does a lot of regular damage, and it has a lot of bodies. It has good movements, but it does have some weaknesses. Its weaknesses are high drops. A Fangs of Sotek list is just about always going to have 10 or more drops. And so as long as you can get under that, you can dictate who takes first turn. And that's pretty important against Fangs of Sotek because they can hit you extremely hard turn one. So you want to get the jump on them. You're generally going to want to take that first turn, and we'll get to that here in a second. Another weakness is Fangs of Sotek relies on low wound heroes. Seraphon is, you look at their war scrolls and they're not all that powerful until you start layering all these synergies and buffs on top of them. Now, a lot of them in Fangs of Sotek rely on small, low wound foot heroes. And so we're going to attack that as well. So how to beat a Fangs of Sotek list? I think there's really kind of two different options you can take here. And the first one is an Alpha Strike. You really want to take that first turn against Fangs of Sotek, and you want to hit them hard. Hit those skink hordes before they get their buffs up. Once those skink hordes get their buffs up, they're getting +1 to save. They're running and shooting and charging. They're doing mortal wounds. They can be nasty. But if you're hitting them turn one, before any of those buffs get off, 40 skinks, I think they'll average 4 damage to you if they do their Overwatch shooting when you charge them. So they're not really that scary in the top of turn one. And so if you have something that can Alpha Strike those hordes, do it. And you can clear off quite a few of those hordes. Now, a lot of times, the skinks do have an ability for a command point. They can shoot when you charge them and then retreat if they roll a 4 up. And so it's only a 50-50 shot that they'll actually get out of combat. They're not going to do much damage to you in turn one, but it takes a command point. And a lot of Fangs of Sotek lists don't start with any command points, or if they do, they're only starting with 1 to get them out of trouble on an Alpha Strike. So if they are starting with 1, hit both of the skink hordes at the same time in that Alpha Strike if you can, so that they can't use them on both. It's still a 50-50 shot if they'll get out of combat anyway, so you have a pretty good chance of clearing at least one of those skink hordes if you can hit them hard. Even better if you can just shoot them. Turn one, they're likely only on a 5-up save, and so you can clear quite a few of them that way. The other one is, your common trope you hear, just shoot the heroes. And that is fairly important for a Fangs of Sotek list. And target priority is important here. You want to be hitting the Skink Star Priest and the Skink Priest. Primarily that Skink Star Priest. That Skink Star Priest is the one that gives the mortal wounds to all the skinks. And it's an automatic buff. He just points his staff to him, and now they're doing mortal wounds on 6s to wound. And so if you can take him out, that will be your priority target. It's only 5 wounds on a 5-up save, so it should be fairly easy to take that out. Now, I know I've just mentioned 2 things, Alpha Strike and just shoot the heroes. And that's really the best way to hit Fangs of Sotek early and hit them hard. If you can't do either one of those, then you're probably... Maybe it's not a top tier army you're playing with, or it's got other tricks. If you can tank Fangs of Sotek, that might be a possibility. If you can dominate one of the other phases, maybe you can come at it that way. But if you're attacking Fangs of Sotek, I think you want to hit them hard top of turn 1, and you want to shoot the heroes, especially that Skink Star Priest. He's vital in just about every Seraphon list. So let's move on now to Lord Kroak. Lord Kroak's weaknesses. He does require support. Now, Lord Kroak on his own is only 320 points, but once you add his support in, he's up to 600 points. So it is a hefty chunk of the army, and those support pieces can be targeted and removed to weaken Kroak. Also, a weakness is all the damage is done in the magic phase. And so Kroak is pretty much useless in combat and the shooting phase. Doesn't do anything else there. Generally, Kroak is sitting still somewhere on the board. They can move a little bit through some shenanigans with the Balewind Vortex, but generally Kroak is kind of sitting still, projecting power out onto the board. And so you play around those things. Take down his support pieces, and then avoid him if he's sitting still. So how to beat? Don't attack Kroak until you remove the support pieces. So you want to first kill the Saurus Ashvalith Banner Bearer. This guy gives Kroak a +1 to the casting, which is you're kind of stacking that on top of the other +1s Kroak gets, and then extends the range of Kroak's spells by 6 inches. Also gives everybody in a bubble a 6-up Feel No Pain. And so this is a very good support hero and is included in just about every list that has Kroak. And if you can attack that Saurus Ashvalith Bear, then Kroak's power projection is brought down significantly. They lose a +1 to cast, they lose 6 inches to the spell, and they lose that aura of the Feel No Pain for all the support pieces that are around Kroak. You also want to try to dispel or unbind the Balewind Vortex. The Balewind Vortex fairly easy to dispel, and so if you can get within 30 inches of it on your turn, just dispel that thing. I would make that a priority because that cuts Kroak's power projection by another 6 inches. So now this Kroak spell that's normally 10 inches is increased by 6 for the bearer and 6 for Balewind Vortex. And if you can cut those things down, you can easily stay out of 10 inches away from Kroak. And so dispel that in your turn if you can. If you have an automatic unbind in your army, use that on the Balewind Vortex because you can really limit Kroak's usability for the rest of that magic phase if you can get rid of that Balewind Vortex. Also, stay 10 inches away from Kroak unless you can take him down. If you've taken out some of these support pieces, go in for the kill. But if you can't do those wounds that are required to kill Kroak, he's fairly tough for a wizard, then stay away. Because on Kroak's turn, he's going to do a lot of mortals to you if you're within that 10 inches. So attack Kroak's support pieces and reduce his power projection. We've talked about it before. Here's his bubble, his aura that shoots out from his spells, and that's at full power. He covers basically a big portion of the board. If you take out his support pieces, you reduce that down to 10 inches, and you can easily avoid him if you can't kill him. Now let's move on to Salamanders. Weaknesses. To be honest, there aren't really a lot of weaknesses for Salamanders. They are very good for their points. Now, they did get a pretty hefty increase in points. There are 110 points for each Salamander, but I think they're still worth it. You'll see these in a lot of lists, especially Starborn lists where you can teleport these guys around. Bravery can be an issue for Salamanders, and we'll talk about that here in a second. They come with some handlers. For each big unit of Salamanders, you'll have 3 Salamanders and 9 handlers. And those handlers are basically used as ablative wounds. We'll take off those handlers before we ever apply any wounds to the Salamanders. And so if you remove 9 handlers, all of a sudden those Salamanders are going to be battle shocking. And so that's one way you can attack them. So how to beat? They are likely teleporting around the board every turn. They do have to come in 9 inches away from the enemy. They only have a 12-inch shooting, so you need to be cognizant of your screens and screen your important units by at least 4 inches. And so those Salamanders can come in, and they're really made as a scalpel unit. I'm going to teleport these guys where I want them, and I'm going to kill the important pieces that you have in your army. Salamanders do a ton of mortals. On 6s, they do D3 mortals to hit, and they each have 4 attacks, 4 shots. And so you're going to look at quite a few mortals, and then they charge in and they do mortals in combat as well. So these guys are pretty nasty. So screening against them is by far the most important thing you can do. And then don't just plink damage at them, because they're just going to take off those handlers, and you're not going to reduce the effectivity of those salamanders until you remove all those handlers. So focus fire on the salamander unit so that you can remove enough of those handlers. They're just one wound each, that you can cause the salamanders to battle shock. This is especially valuable in Coalesced. In Coalesced, they only have a bravery of 5. So, if you kill off 8 of these handlers, the rest of the salamanders are going to run automatically. In Starborn, it's a little bit more difficult, but that bravery is still a huge concern. They do have 10 bravery in Starborn, but you kill off enough of those handlers, and we're going to lose a few more handlers or a few salamanders in the bravery. So that's what I'm looking to beat. How to beat the salamanders: screen well, and then focus fire and try to battle shock them off if you can. On to Thunderlizard and Koatl's Claw. This is not the top tier faction of Seraphon, but if you're struggling against them, I think it has one very big weakness, and it is very command point heavy. Both these sub-factions are. Thunderlizard and Koatl's Claw they need those command points to get all their buffs up. It's very likely for me in Thunderlizard to want to pour about 3 command points into a Stegodon if it's going into melee, and then I'm using another 2 or 3 on Engine of the Gods, Bastildons, and so I'm looking for a ton of command points in this list. Now, Seraphon has a lot of abilities to create command points, and so you need to look for those ways of how are they creating those command points, how are they generating command points every turn, and I need to take out those items. So how to beat, attack those command point generators. In Thunderlizards, a lot of time it is going to be Kroak or Slann that's going to be generating those command points. I play them a lot to where I'm sitting just a Slann back in the back corner and generating command points there. So it can be difficult to get to those pieces that are generating those command points. But you'll want to focus on those command point generations, because once you take those down, we lose a lot of our buffs and synergies in Thunderlizards. Koatl's Claw is sort of the same way. You are going to be using a ton of command points. The difference is the general, which is usually going to be a Carnosaur in Koatl's Claw, has a Aethercorch Brooch. If you remember that, on a 4-up, they're going to refund every command point that general spends. So you want to focus onto that Carnosaur. Carnosaurs only have a 4-up save. You're going to want to try to take down this big monster here, because he will keep that command point generation running. It's likely to have a Slann or some Star Priests in this army to kind of feed those initial, and then this general will keep generating them back to you. And so, again, look for the Skink Star Priest in a Koatl's Claw list. A Star Priest is also vital because it's buffing all the other units, but it's also providing those command points that Koatl's Claw desperately needs. Another way you can attack that is to take abilities that steal command points or increase the cost. We've seen that in a couple of different factions. If you have a hero or an ability that will take our command points when we earn them, that's a great way to just completely hamstring Thunderlizards or Koatl's Claw. Another one, of course, is Teclis with his doubling the cost of command points. That hurts tremendously because now everything costs twice as much, and we love to stack those command points on top of each other, and you can't do that now. And so find a way to attack that command point generation against Thunderlizards or Koatl's Claw. Of course, all of this might change here in a few weeks when we get new Kroak. We have no idea what his war scroll is yet, and so it could change the way the entire army works. We don't know yet. Right now, Kroak in Friends is pretty powerful, and the new Kroak may offer some new strategies and abilities, so we may have to re-attack this at a later point once we get to know what new Kroak does. And of course, always remember, if you do lose against Seraphon, it's all part of the great plan. Even if Seraphon loses, you know what? It's all part of the great plan. All right, guys. Let me know below in the comments if there's another strategy you've used to beat Seraphon, or if you're a Seraphon player, what's another strategy that we need to look out for so that we don't lose. All right. Catch y'all in the next one.